TV.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busiku. Our next conversation, we shall be exploring any reactions to President Museveni's address last evening. We shall also take a look at the NSSF as 20% that is still pending, and also the politics surrounding COVID-19. Well, last evening, as President Museveni eased the lockdown, the NSSF MD, that is Mr. Byarugaba, in a letter to his members, turned around and said that the fund is actually willing to pay members only if Parliament does amend the law to allow it. To talk to us, we do have the opposition chief whip, Ssemuju Nganda, who is also the MP for Kira municipality. Well, we do understand that you must be having the most contributors in your area. But then I do also have Mr. Rwakakamba Morrison. He's also an NRM member, and he is also suing the NSSF. Why are they not giving us our 20%? Mr. Morrison and Mr. Ssemuju, welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
We would like to get your reactions on the President's directives last evening. What were the major takeaways from either of you gentlemen, and what would you have done differently if you are in his position? Let me start with you, Mr. Nganda.
I think I am still internalizing what the President said. But I think for me, he simply made a threat to relax. At the end of his speech, he had relaxed nothing. He simply made a threat, please, if we do A, B, C, D, around June we'll do something. I am actually not sure. Maybe the only reason he came to deliver that speech was because the 14 days are ending either today or tomorrow. So he needed to extend them. In fact, for me, if I were the President, maybe I should have extended without having to announce measures that are not going to work. But I can understand the impatience of all of us. If you've been in your house, if you have been out of job, you want to return first to normal life, but also you want to return to work because you need to continue living. So his speech was carefully crafted to give hope without announcing any further relaxation. So there was some excitement that he has said this, because I have read newspapers this morning. I read the Monitor, and it's very interesting. Monitor says he announced the following measures. They will take effect on June 2nd. So did he have to announce them yesterday? Yes, because you have a population that is tired of the lockdown. So you give it hope by announcing something that is far away. Because we don't know what is going to happen between now and 2nd. I am not sure if you continue registering these cases of either truck drivers or anyone else between now and June 2nd, that he will be making the fulfilling the pledge he made last evening. Seeing what is happening in countries that have been adversely affected, Europeans, Americans, and they are back at work. I think many of them have relaxed more than 50% of the restrictions. For us, we have not been affected even by a quarter. I think we can't be relaxing at the same speed like Europeans, like Americans, where we have total control. Of course, with the borders, you may not, because even if you say the airport should begin functioning, you may not have aircrafts coming in because of restrictions in other countries. But I don't see a reason why people don't go to work in Uganda. I don't see the reason. If you came to the area where I am an MP, I drive through almost every day. Almost everybody is out. This restriction that you should not have a gathering of more than 5 people, I had a burial next to my house, and people who attended were more than 500, and the police was not bothered. If you move deeper in some rural areas, I was in Kayunga some time back, they don't even know that there are restrictions. So I think my own conclusion, and I'm sorry, I think Mr. Museveni, first of all, he has always been uncomfortable with socialization and assemblies. This is a God-sent opportunity that at least under the name of COVID, you can restrict gatherings, you can restrict, and I think now increasingly he's going to be more political motivated than health because you see the threat to life, I don't think it is as it is being presented. That's how I look at it. But you take advantage of it. You're always uncomfortable with gatherings, politics. So what people who are going to suffer together with us now are religious leaders and maybe some business people. So therefore, in a nutshell, I think these measures that the president announced and said should start on 2nd should all have started yesterday. I am not even sure why the president wants to become the sole provider of everything under COVID. That you want to announce masks for all and then you want to be the provider. Because in other countries, they are just announcing measures and then individually will go to implement them. He wants to be the sole provider of food, of masks, of everything. He wants the state to take full control of the proceedings.
He contends that it's in that way you're protecting the people in the long run. If you let everyone provide food, people will be putting themselves in danger. But if you let the government do it, you're actually protecting people.
No. What the government is supposed to do, because if you've been watching TV all over the world, they are distributing food. I saw the worst case was in India, where they are even distributing cooked food. I thought the president should have announced measures and then the security will ensure that those measures are respected. If you told me that food must be distributed to people who are in their homes, then the police must ensure that I follow that measure and they may be arresting me if I am not following. But when you say no distribution of food, now no distribution of masks, now all masks must look the same, I don't understand why the president thinks the state should take on that huge responsibility.
Understood, Ssemuju Nganda. Well,
because what happens, you give me a mask and I lose it.
When it comes to the issue of
so
the
I
masks,
go back to
the president contends that they need to get those authentic masks, because what you've seen in the other countries, you supply masks and then you find out that these masks are not at par when it comes to actually warding off the spread of the coronavirus. I do also have Morrison Rwakakamba. He's an NRM member and he's also suing the NSSF over the 20%. He's also the proprietor of the Agency for Transformation. Yes. Now, let's take a look at what some of the major takeaways from the president's speech last evening. What would you have done differently? I'm sure you do not agree with Mr. Ssemuju.
No. I think of the start of this crisis, over this pandemic. The president has been extremely very reflective, because as a head of state, he is very much responsible, if you will, for the security, for the well-being of the people, of course working with the rest of the other branches of government. So like they say, the final responsibility, really, the buck stops with him. Some people say that, but the responsibility is with him. So to the extent that if you look across the world and you look at the number of cases of coronavirus, infections that we've had, extremely very low compared to other nation states across the world. But also, fortunately and thankfully to the Almighty and the interventions, we don't have, any singular death. So I think, therefore, to that extent, you would see that the interventions that the president and his cabinet members and the rest of the stakeholders in the country took at the time they took those measures, I think they have extremely been very, very helpful. And I think really the first line in really managing a country is to make sure that you stop the bleeding, you stop the hemorrhage, you make sure that there is no death. So the lockdowns, therefore, to that extent, I think have been justified, and I think has explained that very well. And for the past speeches that he has, spoke about this issue, we can see that we now, first of all, understand the ways and means and tactics of how this virus, works, on how it manifests itself. So now we have got, I think, as a country, the people, because of this awareness, and I think the MPs have also been participating in the awareness because they recorded some messages and they have been in their constituencies. So there is a fair now understanding of this virus. And the president has been enumerating the ways of, categorically on how do you, social distance, wearing a mask, don't sneeze, and, all these things. So I think there is a fair amount of understanding. And I think this emerges from how we have handled complex emergencies and diseases in the country, from Marburg and, Ebola, HIV, AIDS, and the awareness. And I think now, really, the population is medically, civically conscious to really engage this. And of course, we may not know how to resurrect when people have died, but I think as a country we know how to resurrect the economy. So I think now the key rebalancing act has been people are in their homes, they are in distress, livelihoods. There has been some relief with the voluntary, giving of food and the public procured food that has been distributed. But how do we balance, the need for, to live, survive, not die, but also live meaningfully? So I think where we have reached, and I think that is what the president was trying to balance, is how do we make sure that we manage this COVID-19 pandemic, but while beginning to resuscitate or to put some oxygen in the economy. And I think the engagement and the thinking and the approach is essentially based around that. My view really is that I think the learnings that we are getting and the guidance even from the World Health Organization is that this COVID-19 may not be necessarily going away. So we must learn to normalize with it in a sense that we manage it. We aim to defeat it, but I think the approach going forward is going to be, how do we manage to live with it?
How do we manage to live with the pandemic?
With the pandemic, while really making sure that we squeeze it and that we eventually really defeat it, just like we are defeating flu.
And that's where the masks come through.
So now, therefore, thank you so much. I think you're reading the flow of the logic. Is now, masks are going to be extremely, very, very important. For everyone to wear a mask, as we see in terms of going forward, everyone is going to require to kind of social distance. So we will have to figure out ways and means. So it's not necessarily going back to normal life, but how do we, manage adaptively this pandemic and overcome it?
Okay, let's now talk about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Ssemuju Nganda, well, the president did say that the tourism sector has been hit the hardest. $1.6 billion lost. And he also said that the chair remittances, the money gotten from our people in the diaspora, also reduced. We lost $1.3 billion. Well, in your opinion, what is the best way to handle the COVID-19 pandemic and also save the economy?
That's a question for which you don't have an easy answer. The Tanzanian approach is that you must not lock down anyone. Let's just continue.
That's a disastrous
one. The American president started that way when he said some people, especially the older ones, can sacrifice and die to allow the country to survive. In the case of Uganda, because we have registered no death, we are told there has been no community infection. We will be affected because economies are interconnected. If you have no flights coming into Uganda, certainly tourism is going to be affected. The hospitality sector is going to be affected hugely. Because if you look at the hotels, I'll tell you, in the first when the first measures were announced, I attempted to have a meeting in my constituency, and every place I went to, smaller restaurants, they all had closed. And that closure meant hundreds of young people are working there as bartender and those who are cooking food. They all had been sent home. That was the first, when the first measures were announced. So you have a lot of people who are not working. Subsequently, because the area I represent also has some factories, you had workers of factories being advised to stay there or to go home. If you came, there is a factory I think called Cascade on Namugongo Road. These ones who make this air for women. They employ, I think, about 1,000 people. You will see people streaming in the morning in big numbers. They were all asked to go home. At the beginning, because everybody thought this is going to be a 2 weeks, a 1 month problem, I think factories and other companies were willing to pay their staff. Now they have come to a time when they are telling them, please, there will be no pay. I remember listening to a program on one of FM radio stations, and the one who was hosting the program asked people to call in and say, did you receive the March salary? Are you sure you will receive the April salary? And majority said, if I did not receive the March salary, I will be a fool to think I'll receive the April salary. And these are things that I think we must be discussing. The other day I saw the Islamic University in Uganda announcing suspension of all staff and all the activities, and this will be at no pay. New Vision, which is the biggest media company in Uganda, announced that staff will have to forego about 60% of their earnings, and I'm told some are being sent on leave without pay.
Yeah, that has been running across all platforms as far as COVID-19 is concerned. But then,
so the moment you have that, you have that as a country. That's why I said the answers are not going to be easy answers, because in the countries, rich countries, what they have done is to propose stimulus packages from US to Europe to Middle East, because they have resources. In Uganda, I think deliberately the government is trying to avoid announcing those packages for two reasons. First, we don't have the money, but two, some of the biggest section of our population is informal. You may not even know which company you're going to give. They don't register with URA, they don't, but that's where majority of the population is. We made proposals to government when we were considering the budget, which we passed as a parliament. First, as opposition, we proposed that in the budget which was presented to Parliament, which is 45 trillion shilling, we can save about 5 trillion shilling and then give people loans either without interest, some sort of an intervention from the state. And our proposals was to government, please, the non-essential operations of the state, some of them will not even be there by the nature of this disease. For example, if you look at the budget that we have passed, we have about 219 billion shilling. That is money for workshops and seminars. If you have hotels closed and you can't have seminars, and you have 219 billion shilling, you have money for travel abroad. I think it comes to about 100 billion shilling. You have about 116 billion shilling travel inland. You have all those sorts. So our proposal was that we can start with this money. And I am one of those who don't believe in distribution of free money that you just give. That, as a person, I don't believe in it. So our proposal was that for at least the formal businesses that will need some help, the resuscitation he was talking about, make some loans available, either no interest, and then there are all sorts of proposals that have been made. At least suspend payment of payee to allow companies. We can even suspend payment of some other obligation like the monthly NSSF contribution, because at the moment it's survival. If the companies can find money to pay salary, you may help them with suspension of the monthly NSSF, payee, VAT, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, the government has to survive. Because if you look at the budget, next year we will be borrowing about 7 trillion shilling from commercial banks for domestic financing. So the government itself is poor. And I can understand when the president every day must continue justifying the movement of trucks. So therefore, in a nutshell, we think, yes, the state can find some money, even if it is borrowed money, and then you start with the formal businesses, and then you can look for a solution for the informal sector. But at least you allow the formal businesses to continue, because these are the ones who are paying taxes even for you to survive. But to say we'll make no intervention, I think is to pretend that we are not in a crisis.
Speaking of government interventions, many people have actually sought the help of the NSSF to release that 20% to the worker to be able to navigate through these trying times of COVID-19. And my guest on the far left, Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, is actually suing the NSSF and the Attorney General, who represents the government, for actually is giving them 10 days. Is that right, Mr. Rwakakamba, to actually come up with means or measures to actually distribute this 20% to all the workers? Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, tell us about this petition and what it's going to be, and what you expect to achieve at the end of the day. Yes, why are MPs not doing their jobs? That is the main question that we're asking ourselves. This 20% would have been released a long time ago. Help us understand that.
Well, we are not suing the MPs and the Parliament, but we are suing the NSSF.
Because right now, Byarugaba threw the ball in the court of the parliamentarians last evening.
Let me first say that what is happening in NSSF, you see tendencies of unconstitutionalism, because the main tenet or the anchor for constitutionalism is really freedoms, is human rights, and is liberty. So if you have 2 million people who have saved to the extent of over 13 trillion Uganda shillings, in a fund, and that fund is social security, because social security, in fact, refers to, it's about a social safety net, that if people are in a distress, if people have been legally locked out of work, because the lockdown that we are in is legal, so we cannot actually go to work because of a pandemic. So to this extent, you would expect that a social security fund that encompasses 2 million Ugandans would be willing to say, hey, perhaps we should find a relief or access to a percentage of the fund, such that you can go through this crisis. When you reach the age when you have to get the money, you are really not dead, so that you can go through and be able to get that old age replacement income. Two is that the 20% ask, for example, those who are arguing that it is going to replace, it is going to impact on the pension fund, it is going to impact on old age replacement income. If people are asking for 80%, for example, that would be understandable, but that's not the case. But NSSF has not been willing to listen to the savers, to meet the savers halfway and say there is something that we can do. I'll give you an example.
Before you give me the example, Mr. Morrison, but don't you think this petition will actually jeopardize what is happening, the proceedings on the floor of Parliament over the same?
I really don't think so, by the way. First of all, you may want to know that this bill that they are talking about in Parliament has been dusting, for a very long time. So certainly there has not been really a movement on it. So to come up and say that this is going to be, to stall conversations,
rather catalyze.
I don't think that's not necessarily true. But also we have to believe that our court system, can quickly, because courts are also there for the people, just like the Parliament is there for the people, just like the executive is there for the people, would move very quickly to make a point on that. But also, I really need to, because also the bill in Parliament, for example, what we're asking for is the liberty and freedoms like under the Constitution, where we would be free to save for our pension or age replacement income in any fund that can give us the best return on our savings. So we actually saying this monopoly of NSSF, should be broken. It should be liberalized. And I think that this crisis has taught us that the dangers of a monopoly, the sheer corporate arrogance that you saw at NSSF, shows you that we need to break this up. If it is Prudential, or if it is any other fund where I feel it is going to respect me as a saver, that is where I should save for my old age replacement income. And really the other aspect is that we are calling for a broader understanding and reform of social security, across really in the country. Why would you have a social security that is not talking about education, access, that is not talking about, relief in terms of healthcare, that is not talking about, some relief in terms of shelter, or mortgage finance, about unemployment? There are so many people, for example, who lost jobs or who no longer have jobs, but who have saved in NSSF for, let's say, 8, 7 or 10 years, and they have their money there. They are not yet 55, and they cannot access it. They have nowhere whither to start. So where the unemployment relief that any social security arrangement should be putting forward? So those are some of the issues, and they are not reflected even in the bill that is in Parliament. I
did also go through your whole petition, and
yes.
You did mention somewhere that the NSSF did actually donate to the National Task Force on COVID-19 380 million Uganda shillings. Where did all that money come from if they are saying they do not have the 20%? And you also did mention in the petition that the same NSSF is actually collecting 100 billion Uganda shillings every month. How come they are resisting to release this 20%? Because it seems the money is there.
You see, first of all, the empathy is not there. Also to the emotional intelligence of putting people at the center, knowing that you are not managing this fund for profit per se. This is a social security fund, which is about social safety guards to ensure that people, are living a better life, all through. I think that's a big issue. Then really the other aspect is, there are many options if they decided to discuss with the members. Every other year, NSSF is giving interest rate to savers of between 11 to 13%. So if you said, for example, we are all in a crisis, the economy may suffer. You remember those analytics they were making as if they are macroeconomic managers of the country when they are just a fund. They could have said, look here, 2020, we are not giving you this interest of 13 or 11%. Let us give it to you in the crisis. And then perhaps, then we begin thinking about, interest rate in 2021. I think savers, they could have met the savers or the members of NSSF really in the middle. And those who are saying that it is going 20% would impact the economy. I don't know where they studied the economics. There is what they call the rule of aggregate demand. I don't think if you give me my 20%, I'm going to go to Dubai and buy perfume. I would be spending it here.
It's all about survival.
It's all about survival, and I would be spending it in the economy, and that would make sense. I would be buying food and doing all those things.
Morrison Rwakakamba, he's an NRM member, and he's also the proprietor of Agency for Transformation, the second, that is the second petitioner right there. And it's the same company that he owns. So you have Morrison Rwakakamba.
Actually, it is
number one. You have Agency for Transformation.
It's a think tank. So
NSSF and the government right there. I also do have the Kira Municipality MP, that is Ssemuju Nganda, is also going to be telling us what is happening in Parliament. We do understand that Parliament has an institutionalized social savings scheme of its own. Help us understand, how does it work? And do you also grapple, like we are seeing members who are saving with NSSF?
I think first of all, we have a Parliamentary Pension Act. That's where members of Parliament and staff are covered, because we work for the public. I think those of us who are working for the public will continue receiving our salaries. I have not heard of any public institution that is announcing that it will not be paying. So we are in a different situation from the rest of people who are covered under the social NSSF. At the beginning of this conversation on NSSF, there are two things that we are trying to achieve with the proposal to amend the NSSF Act. The first was coverage. Uganda is now a country of about 45, 42 million people. Those who are saving with NSSF were at any one given time either 1.8, the active ones are about 0.8 million people. So both the managers of NSSF and managers of the country proposed that we may need to increase our coverage. If you compare, for example, to Kenya, I think the social coverage in Kenya is about 20-something%. In Uganda was less than 10%. But also there was a proposal, he speaks about, of liberalization. These were the two main objectives of this amendment that has stayed in Parliament for more than 7 years. Why do we continue tying people in NSSF? Don't we have other platforms? Can other platforms start? So this is where the COVID problem found us, discussing widening the coverage and also liberalization of the sector. Now a crisis came that nobody ever imagined it would ever happen. If you look at the analysis from the Western capitals, they are telling you this is something they last experienced more than 100 years ago.
1918.
Yes.
Spanish.
So,
Spanish flu.
yes. So therefore, we must think very quickly on how we help people to go through it so they can live for tomorrow. And that's how the proposal that the NSSF can pay at least 20% or 10% to the savers started. I don't agree with Morrison, maybe the lawyers can help, that without amending the law, NSSF was in a position to pay. Because the law prescribes the ages at which you can receive either, or you can begin receiving money from NSSF. But of course the NSSF managers also became scaremongers. That the moment the world is going to come to an end. So they were as if telling Parliament, because from what I have seen in Parliament, the 20% is going to be passed.
Okay,
there are
now,
few people who are saying...
that is a great statement.
Yes.
If the 20% is passed, what would be the immediate ramifications on the economy? Help us understand.
I have spoken to NSSF managers, and the reason they were hesitant from their point of view is that most of the money is tied up in bonds and other projects. That the moment you tell them to pay 20% of the 13 trillion shilling in their own calculation, if everybody went in, because there are people who will not need NSSF money to survive, but if everybody went in, that they will need something like between 1.5 to 3 trillion shilling.
That means selling off the government bonds.
Or retiring them at a cost. And their own explanation is that, first of all, the people who are saving with the NSSF will register a loss. Because the moment you retire a business that is ongoing and you lose the profits on that business, it means you cannot be paid as you were promised. And two, the government, and by the way, it is serious. I don't know how government will be able to navigate this. Because this government has been borrowing from commercial banks. That's where NSSF is putting its money for government to go and access. So the moment you withdraw this money from government, they will have, I don't know where they will get the money, because sometimes the banks that are lending to government that are buying these bonds are also using NSSF money. They go and deposit and then work out the formula. But government can borrow. The other day I saw IMF giving us money. I think government can look for, because the Americans now, I have heard they want to borrow more than $1 trillion. If the Americans want to borrow $1 trillion,
1.3 trillion.
Who is Uganda not to borrow when you're in a crisis? I don't believe, I agree with Morrison that the money that you are giving people is not to go and put under their pillow. They are borrowing money actually to help the economy resurrect, because they will be the one who's spending. And that's why...
So the 20% will have a positive impact on the economy? It
will certainly have, because you see, if you have someone who is not spending now, is in his house waiting for government posho and beans, the moment you pay him money, he will be in the market buying meat, and then that sector will also benefit. He will be buying sugar, he will be buying this, and all these people are not buying now. Okay,
thank you for putting that into perspective. Now, Morrison, I'm going to get to you. Now, NSSF contends that out of the 2.3 million savers that they have, 1.3 of those savers are active. But out of those 1.3, 1 million actually have money under 10 million Uganda shillings. And the MDB Rugaba contends that even though this 20% was to be doled out to these people, it wouldn't do any big, it wouldn't do anything much for these people. Look, what do you make of that?
You see, for someone in a grass house would think that if I accessed my 100,000, that it would not help me. But even if it is perhaps 50,000, 100,000, 300,000, a million, because the needs I have perhaps different from the needs of an investment banker on Wall Street. And I think that those who are making that argument live on Wall Street in New York. But for me, whatever is accessed, it can help sort of the members' problem who is in distress. So I don't think that really that argument would really arise.
And also, let's get back to Parliament with you, Mr. Ssemuju Nganda. We also do understand that you were told to return some money, the 20 million shillings. Did you return your part?
At the beginning, I had refused, but now there was a court order. I had actually refused, and I said, you
Why?
see, because of the situation I have faced as a person, something other people have not faced in 100 years. Even this morning, it was raining, but there are people at my gate. And you see, the point he made earlier, even the money that for you may even forget it is in your trouser. You give someone 5,000 and is on his knees praying the Almighty to make you live forever. 5,000. So I faced a problem I have never faced, I have never imagined I'll ever face. So I said, okay, the moral issues, you can sentence me, I am going to plead guilty. But if I have a 20 extra million shilling to buy, because for me I've been buying from Mandela. At the beginning I was buying Posho, I go and use a plastic mug to begin distributing. It became too costly. So I went to Mandela to buy, and it has been very expensive. But it will be a luxury for me to continue living in my house when I have people outside the gate. I have told this story. The first 2 days I refused to open. So my daughter, 10 years, came running, Daddy, but the children are crying. Now you can imagine, the child is emotional, and me, an adult here, I am pretending. So I said, yes, I agree, even if there are issues with this money. You can sentence me, I'm going to plead guilty. I will ask for forgiveness later. But of course, there are many roadblocks. Eventually, the court came in. So I returned the money. Not because I was willing to be attacked by everybody. But eventually, I say now, yes, the section of the public is not happy with the money. That I said I will resist. Now, court told me, you must return the money. So I adhered to, I said, okay, let me return the money and tell people if I was going to give you 2 kilograms, now I can afford to give you 1 or not to give you any. So eventually, for me, the debate was settled. The rest is just the politics about the money, but I returned it, and many MPs have returned the money.
Let's talk about the NRM Manifesto Week and its implementation. We do have the NRM government coming out to say that the implementation is at 77.9%. I would like to get your comments on that and how the opposition has performed in Parliament during COVID-19.
I think for the NRM, you need to read their manifesto page by page. And ask them, here, you made this pledge, how far? But just to generally say we have achieved 70%.
Do you agree with the numbers?
You see, the promise that, the broader promise that was made by the NRM is that they're going to transform Uganda into a middle income state. That was the broader goal of these 5 years. And
but by the end of
a year by year, they started saying this is not going to be achieved. And it hasn't been achieved. So me, I don't want to go into how much megawatts have been added on our grid. I don't want to look at how many hoys have been distributed.
But we can look at the opposition and how you've performed in Parliament. Let us know.
It's very difficult. The way the Parliament functions, it's very difficult to assess the individual performance. At the beginning of this Parliament and throughout, most of the businesses there has been generated by the private members, majority of them opposition MPs. The bills, private members' bills, the motions, but I don't have the figures. But I think if you took us out of that Parliament, maybe there will be no Parliament. So we've contributed to the normal daily work of an MP, bringing motions, making budgetary proposals, scrutinizing, trying to check government through accountability committees from the time we started up to today. If you remember the work that the Katuntu committee done, Osege was chairing PAC. So really we did some work as the opposition. But the trouble with the Parliament is that decisions of Parliament, maybe except in South Africa, are advisory. Even when you tell them, even when you sit and decide that this must not be done, they will come to brief you that, yes, you told us, but it was late. So really, yes, if you took away the opposition from Parliament, I am not sure there will be Parliament in Uganda.
So why are they passing a budget that has not been adjusted to account for COVID-19? In a nutshell, we are wrapping up.
We asked the Minister of Finance, because our members who sit on the budget committee, the Honorable Cecily Ogwal, Mwanga Chivumbi, and Winnie Chiza, presented an alternative, and including the figures I've given you before, because the budget process in Uganda is a 1-year process. This particular budget, which the President will be reading to the country, maybe in about 10 days, was presented to Parliament towards the end of December, before the COVID pandemic. In fact, it was a pre-COVID budget, and that's why it had item for travel abroad, even including travel inland, because I can now travel even to any district. It also had seminars, it had fuel for this and that. So at the end of the day, the Minister of Finance said, because we made proposals to rewrite the budget, they said, no, you don't rewrite, we will come back with the revisions. So we are still waiting. We are not sure they will come back.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, we are wrapping up. I'm going to give you a few seconds to let us know what your next course of action would be in case the Attorney General doesn't respond to your petition within 10 days, like you had humbly submitted. Well,
it is very clear that we view the NSSF Act as unconstitutional, so that's why we went to the Constitutional Court. The Attorney General and the NSSF were given 10 days, so if they don't respond, then the court will sit and determine the merits of the petition and decide without the input of those who are supposed to. So I think it can be an expert judgment, and that would be interesting for the country.
Indeed. Morrison Rwakakamba and Ssemuju Nganda, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, right now we're going to take a very, very short break, but we'll be right back with more information. Don't move a muscle. This is Morning at NTV.